At 7:38 on a Friday morning, my best friend of 11 years told me to get a life outside my marriage, and then she hung up. I sat in the clinic lot with the phone still against my ear. June in Kalispell, and there was frost on the windshield anyway, a thin gray skin of it going soft at the edges. Behind me, my daughter was working her right arm into her brace by herself, the way the therapists had taught her, tongue caught between her teeth. Was that Aunt Delia? She's busy today, Bug. Stop calling every Friday. Get a life outside your marriage. 11 years of Friday mornings, and that was the whole call. Nell got the last strap through the last loop and held her arm up for inspection, and I told her it was perfect, and it was. She was 7. She had been coming to Cascade Pediatric Therapy since she was 14 months old, and she believed, the way children believe in weather, that Fridays existed so she could sit in the good chair. My husband was already sitting in it. Grant had a clipboard on his knee, and his boots crossed at the ankle, and the waiting room had 7 people in it, counting the girl at the front desk. He didn't stand up when we came in. "Sign this," he said, and held the clipboard out sideways without looking at me. I took it. Financial hardship and reduced fee application. Page 1 of 3, our address filled in already in his blocky capitals. What is this for? It's so we stop paying $95 a week for a kid to squeeze a rubber duck. He turned his phone face down on his thigh. Today's the last one. I've been carrying this house for 6 years, Meredith. Somebody has to be the adult about money. Behind the desk, Josie stopped typing. She did not look up. The mother by the window found something enormously interesting on her phone, and the man beside her did too, and the therapist coming out of the hall with a laminated chart turned around and went back down the hall. "We can talk about it at home," I said. "You're a scheduler at a dental office." He said it at a comfortable volume, the volume of a man ordering lunch. You don't get an opinion on money, you get an opinion on appointments. His phone lit up on his thigh, face down, buzzing against the denim. He picked it up, read it, and typed with one thumb. "Tell her 9 o'clock, he said out loud while he typed. "Tell Delia 9. There was a new fob on his keyring. Square, black, rubberized, the kind that comes with a boat. Nell had gone very still beside my hip. She was looking at the clipboard and then at her father, and she asked him the question in the smallest voice she owns. "Do I still get to come on Fridays?" Grant clicked his phone off. "Ask your mother," he said. "Your mother holds the money." I have thought about that sentence more than any other sentence in my life. At the time, I only heard the cruelty of it. It took me 2 months to hear the other thing in it, that he was building a record out loud in a room with 6 witnesses of who held the money. I signed. I used the pen chained to the front desk, the one with the sticky clicker, and my hand was perfectly steady because I was pressing my thumb into the clicker hard enough to leave a mark that stayed there until lunch. Then I stood up and took Nell's good hand and walked to the desk while he was still folding the pages. If I had fought him in that lobby, the lobby is what Nell would remember. She'd remember her mother's voice going up and the strangers looking, and she would understand, at 7, that her therapy was something 2 adults screamed about. I would rather she remember the good chair. "Josie," I said, "I'd like to make a records request. Certified copies of Nell's complete chart, all 6 years, plus the itemized billing ledger. In writing. I'll pay the copying fee today." Josie's eyes came up off the monitor for the first time. "The whole ledger?" "Every line." She slid the form across. Behind me, my husband said something about the truck being on a meter, and the door chimed, and he was gone. Here is what my husband had that morning. A boat key, a lake, a woman who stamped documents for a living and had just told me to get a life. Here is what he did not have and did not think to want. 30 days from that form, this clinic owed me a copy of every signature it had ever witnessed on my daughter's behalf. One of them was going to be mine. I had never signed it. We went home. I made grilled cheese and cut it into triangles because triangles are structurally superior, and Nell told me about a boy in her class who could burp the alphabet, and I laughed in the right places. That is the whole trick, if anybody wants it. You laugh in the right places, and you do not let a 7-year-old carry your face. At 4:10, the clinic called me back. It was not Josie. It was a woman named Renata from the funding office, and she had that careful voice people use when they've found a problem that isn't theirs. "Mrs. Morrow, I can't process a hardship application for Nell." "We can pay. I've been paying. No, that's the thing. I can't process it because she's already funded." Papers moving. There's a funded account attached to her chart. The court order behind it is dated November of 2021. The kitchen clock ticked. Out in the yard, Nell was throwing a tennis ball at the fence left-handed, over and over. Funded by what? It only says court-ordered. I can't see the source from my side. A pause I could hear her decide to fill. "And I'm sorry, but the contact on the account isn't you." "Whose name is on it?" "I can't read the whole field. It's cut off." Another pause. "It isn't Morrow." I thanked her. I asked her to note the date and time of our call in the chart, and she said she would, and I hung up and stood in my kitchen with a dish towel over my shoulder and looked at my daughter throwing a ball at a fence with the arm that worked. My name is Meredith Morrow. I'm 29, and until that Friday, I believed I knew exactly how poor we were. If you've ever been the person in your house who says no, no to the trip, no to the shoes, no to the good doctor, and then found out you were saying it for someone else's benefit, stay with me. And if there's a name you'd like me to say out loud in this story, put it in the comments, because I read them. There is a chart on the wall of that clinic that I want you to hold on to, because it comes back. Not the medical chart, the other one. It hangs by the door of the mat room where the kids can reach it. 6 years of Fridays, laminated, a grid of 218 squares. The clinic runs a school year calendar, September to June, nothing between mid-June and Labor Day. Gold star for a session attended, a blank for a session missed. Nell had missed 4 in 6 years, 2 with strep, 1 with a snowstorm, 1 the week my father-in-law died. There was a second column on that grid, narrow, with a heading a volunteer had printed in marker, "Grown Up Who Came." 214 squares in that column say Mom. I want to be fair to the woman I was in 2020. When Grant told me the lawsuit over Nell's delivery had been thrown out. Not enough evidence, he said. They close ranks, he said. I believed him because he came home from the lawyer's office gray in the face and didn't eat. When he told me the insurance had denied the therapy as not medically necessary, I believed that too, because insurance denies things. That's the whole business model. So I picked up Saturdays at the dental office, and we paid $95 a week in cash, September through June, with a printed home program over the summers. And every year at tax time he handled it, and every year I said thank you. I stopped arguing about money in year 3. Not from weakness, from arithmetic. Every fight cost me 2 days of him not speaking, and if he wasn't speaking, he wasn't watching her on the Fridays I couldn't get off, and then I gave up a shift or she missed a session. 4 missed squares in 6 years. I bought those squares with my silence, and I would buy them again. At 20 to 10 that night, my phone buzzed with a photo from Bree Kovach, who runs the front desk with me, and had been at a chamber mixer up at the lake. No message, just the picture. A long table with paper lanterns strung over it, my husband in the chair at the end, and sitting sideways across his lap, one arm hooked around his neck, laughing at something off camera, my best friend of 11 years. I looked at it for a long time. Then I did the thing I still can't fully explain, except that some part of me had already started playing. I didn't call Grant. I didn't call Delia. I forwarded the photo to her husband. Owen Prewitt answered in under a minute, and his answer was not the answer of a man who had just found out. I know. Who do you think took it? I traded my Saturday shift with Bree and left Nell with her, and I met him at 8 in the north corner of the Super One Foods lot where the carts go to die. I was leaning against a gray pickup with a dealership magnet on the door, holding 2 gas station coffees, and he handed me one like we'd agreed on it beforehand. I was at the mixer, Owen said. My company had a booth. I've had a booth at that thing for 6 years. He watched a cart roll 10 feet and stop. I saw your friend Bree by the cheese table, and I asked her to send it to you, because if it came from me, you'd have called Delia inside of a minute, and Delia would have called Grant, and I'd have burned 14 months. 14 months. He pulled out his phone and turned it toward me, and I looked at a photograph of a page. It was a notary journal, Delia had kept one since she got her commission, a bound book with a red spine, and she'd made a running joke of it for a decade. I stamped things for a living, Mir. Ruled columns, date, time, document type, signer, method of identification. A tidy hand I'd been reading since we were 18. Line 4, March 10th, 2023, 10:05 a.m. Document guardian's consent in re minor NM. Signer Meredith A. Morrow. Identification. Personally known to notary. I have never in my life signed the A. There are 11 of them, Owen said. First one is February of 2022. Last one is April of 2024. I found the book in the hall closet when I was digging for Wyatt's swim bag, and I asked her what a guardian's consent was, and she said notary stuff. It's confidential, and the next week the book wasn't in the closet anymore. He drank some coffee. So I started taking pictures on the nights she left her tote by the door. Why haven't you done anything with it? That was when he laughed, and it wasn't a nice sound, and it wasn't aimed at me. Because I'm nobody, he said. I'm not Nell's father. I'm not her guardian. I can't ask for one page of her medical records. That's federal, it's HIPAA, and I'm a stranger. I can't file anything about a child who isn't mine. A judge would ask me what standing I have, and the answer is none. And if I walk into the Secretary of State's office with photos out of my wife's private journal in the middle of what is very obviously an affair, do you know what I am? He looked at the card again. I'm a jealous husband. That's the whole file. That's what it becomes the second I open my mouth first. The frost had gone. It was going to be 80 by afternoon. You've been waiting for me, I said. I've been waiting for the woman whose name is in that book to find out she's in it. Owen put his phone away. I'm not a good guy in this, Meredith. I want my son. My lawyer told me an affair gets me nothing in this state. A felony gets me everything. I told him I'd take the coffee and think about it, and I drove home, and I made spaghetti, and Grant came in at 6 and kissed the top of my head and said the Big Fork job had come through. It had come through beautifully, he said. Commercial panel upgrade, 3 months of work. He talked with his hands. He said we'd take a real vacation for once, 12 days up at the lake in August, first 2 weeks, book it off now. Then he opened the fridge and said, with his back to me, and you can stop the 95 a week. I called them. She's plateaued anyway. There's a point where you're just throwing money at a dead arm. Nell was 6 feet away drawing. I said the vacation sounded nice. I wrote it on the kitchen calendar in pencil, lake, with a bracket over the first 12 days of August. And I stood there a second longer with the pencil in my hand. He had 12 days at the lake. I needed 9. The Flathead County Clerk of District Court is in the basement of the old courthouse, and the woman at the counter has a laminated sign that says, "Ask me, I like this." I asked her how a person finds out whether a lawsuit was dismissed. Party name and approximate year, she said. Nell's name pulled it up in about 8 seconds. Cause number DV200938. It had not been dismissed. It had settled in November of 2021, and the file was 3 inches thick, and the top document was an order approving minor's compromise, signed by the Honorable Thomas Lindahl. Gross settlement, $920,000. I read that line the way you read a word in a foreign language you happen to know. Attorney's fee, 25%, $230,000, to Tice and Bearden. Costs, $38,600. Net to the minor, $651,400, to be deposited in a blocked account at Flathead Valley Bank, with the order printed in bold at the bottom of the page. No funds shall be withdrawn from said account, in whole or in part, without further order of this court. The clerk asked if I was all right, and I said the basement was cold. Underneath the order were the petitions. There were 11 of them, and they were beautiful. Someone had made them beautiful. Each one was captioned, "Petition for withdrawal of minors' funds for medical needs." Each one filed by Roland Tice. Each one asking the court to release funds to the father as reimbursement for medical expenses already paid by him. Each one attached to a fan of invoices from Cascade Pediatric Therapy. Every invoice stamped, "Paid in full. Intensive constraint-induced therapy program. 40 sessions, aquatic protocol, 12 weeks, home program supervision, quarterly, and behind the invoices, a one-page progress summary on clinic letterhead, signed by Corinne Ashby, OTRL, saying the child was tolerating the program well. And behind that, on every single one, the document the court actually cared about. Consent of parents, guardians, requiring the signature of both parents, each signature acknowledged before a notary public. Grant Morrow in his blocky hand, Meredith A. Morrow in a hand that leaned right where mine leans left, in ink I have never bought. Notarized by Delia R. Prewitt, commission expiring in 2027, on 11 separate mornings across 26 months, at 10 and 5 past 10 and a quarter after 10. On 10 of those mornings, I was at a dental office 3 blocks away, scheduling crowns. On the 11th, I was 40 feet down her own hallway. I did the arithmetic on the back of a parking receipt because my hands wanted a job. $318,400 had come out of my daughter's account for therapy programs, and my daughter had never in her life been in a pool. There is a specific kind of quiet that lives in a courthouse basement. The fluorescent hum, the copier warming up, somebody's radio through the wall. I sat in that quiet, and I understood that for 6 years I had been the reason my child heard no. No to the specialist in Missoula. No to the summer intensive that other mothers talked about in the lobby. No to the adaptive bike, $2,380. Maybe in the spring, honey. We'll see. I had been the family's no, and I had been so careful about it, and I had been so proud of how carefully I did it. I asked for certified copies of everything. 3 business days on certification, the clerk said, stamping the request. Then she turned her monitor a quarter turn toward herself and frowned at it. Huh, you're the second person to pull this file this year. Who was first? She turned the log around so I could read it. I want to tell you what I did that night, because it is the part people ask about. I went home. I let Nell stay up for one more episode. I sat on the edge of the tub while she brushed her teeth left-handed, and I braided her hair, and she told me the boy in her class had made it to the letter K. Grant came in at 9, smelling like sawdust and somebody's shampoo, and put a hand on my shoulder as he passed, and I did not move away from it. I did not scream. I did not throw the parking receipt at him. I did not say the number. I want to be clear that this was not forgiveness and it was not fear. It was that I had a request pending at a clinic where the office manager slept with my husband, and a records request that had 26 days left to run, and one signature in a bound red book that had my middle initial on it. The second Grant knew what I knew, the book would go in a wood stove, and the clinic's copier would break for a month. So I went to bed beside him. I lay there in the dark doing what I'd done every night for 6 years, which is inventory. And somewhere around 1 in the morning, I stopped counting what I owed. I started counting what he'd signed. The name in the log was Owen Prewitt, March 3rd. I called him from the courthouse steps, and he confirmed it in 4 words. I got that far. He'd read the same 11 petitions and the same fan of invoices, and he had stopped exactly where a stranger stops. The file proved the invoices existed. Nothing in that basement proved they were false. To prove that, someone had to lay the clinic's own treatment record beside the clinic's own bills and show that a child who came on Fridays and squeezed a rubber duck had never once been in a pool. Only a parent can ask for that record. 26 days, I told him. Don't tell me anything else, Owen said. Whatever you're doing, I don't want to be able to testify to it. Delia called me 2 weeks later, and she was warm again, and that was the worst part of the whole month. Mir, hey, about the records thing. Kids yelling somewhere behind her, the clinic's hold music leaking through. 6 years is a lot of paper, hun, and half of it's on the old system. Can you give me till the end of the month? 11 years. She had held my hand in a hospital corridor in March of 2019 when a nurse said the word herbs, and I didn't know what it meant. She had driven me home from 3 of the first year's appointments. She had cried in my kitchen about her own marriage, and I had washed her wine glass and told her Owen was a good man. Of course, I said, whatever's easiest. I hung up and drove to the office and, on my lunch break, sent a certified letter to Corinne Ashby, the clinic's owner, quoting the 30-day rule, the date of my written request, and one sentence declining the extension her office manager had just asked me for. Certified mail costs $8.60, and it is the least dramatic thing in this entire story, and it moved more than any conversation I have ever had. Then I did the second thing, which I had been thinking about since the parking lot. Owen's photographs were not evidence. They were a stranger's pictures of a private book, taken at night, by a man in the middle of a divorce. Any lawyer alive would have made them into a jealous husband inside of 10 minutes. But a notary's journal is not private. It is a public record. In this state, anyone can request a copy of a specific entry, and the notary is required to furnish it. And if the notary won't, the Secretary of State will. So I wrote a request naming a signer, Meredith A. Morrow, and a document type, and a date range, and I mailed it to the Notary Division in Helena and asked the state to obtain the entries. Not to Delia. A state office asking a notary for her journal is a Tuesday. A wife asking is an alarm. She had to stamp my name onto the certified copies of the entries where she had forged it, and she had to do it for a clerk 400 miles away who told her nothing. The copies came back 9 days later in an envelope with a Helena return address, and I sat in my car in the lot and read them in order, and the 11th one stopped me. March 10, 2023, 10:05 a.m., signer Meredith A. Morrow. Method of identification, personally known to notary. I remembered that morning. I had good reason to. It was Nell's splint refitting, the long appointment, the one where they take the old brace apart and she has to sit still for 2 hours. And I had sat in the waiting room the entire time with her coat folded on my knees, 40 feet from Delia's desk, close enough that Delia came out at one point with a cup of the terrible lobby coffee and set it down beside me without a word and squeezed my shoulder. At 10:05 that morning, my best friend wrote in a bound book that I was standing in front of her. I was right there. I was holding my daughter's coat. Grant came home that Thursday with a second truck. He'd put it in the company's name, he said, because the Big Fork job needed the crew split, and he needed me to co-sign the loan because his personal number was, he did a thing with his hand, temporarily complicated. Take it to whoever does your books, I said. You are whoever does my books. Then I'd want to see the books. He laughed, actually laughed, and told me it was cute when I did the accountant voice and went to shower, and I stood in the kitchen listening to the water and understanding that the person who did his books had a red spine journal and a rubber stamp and had squeezed my shoulder in a waiting room. I didn't ask again. 4 days later, the truck was in the driveway anyway, with a temporary tag financed by an LLC I had never heard of. Nell's last Friday was the 26th of June. I paid the $95 in cash at the desk, like I had 213 times before, and I sat in the lobby and watched through the glass while a therapist named Bethany walked my daughter through the shoulder series, and Nell did the thing she does at the end of every session, which is hold her right arm as high as it will go and look around to see whether anybody clapped. I clapped. I always clap. Afterward, Josie came out from behind the desk with a plastic grocery bag. We clear the file when a patient discharges, she said, and her voice did something at the end of the sentence. I didn't want it going in the bin. The sticker chart. 6 years of Fridays, laminated, the corners furred. 214 gold stars and 4 blanks and a narrow column with a marker heading that said, Grown Up Who Came. Nell took the bag from me in the parking lot and looked into it and then up at me, and she asked her question in that voice again, the small one, the one she keeps for the questions she already suspects the answer to. Can I still come on Fridays anyway? I don't have to do the exercises. She had her chin down. I could just sit in the good chair. I told her we'd figure it out. I buckled her in. I drove out of that lot and got 2 blocks and pulled over by the Little League fields and put my head against the wheel for the length of one song on the radio. And then I fixed my face in the visor mirror and asked her whether the boy in her class had gotten to the letter Q. That night, after she was asleep, I called a lawyer. Harriet Vance does guardianship work out of a converted house on 2nd Street and answers her own phone after hours. And she listened to me for 19 minutes without saying anything except, "Ma'am, don't confront him," she said at the end. I wasn't going to. Everyone says that. Paper. Here's what we file. Not fraud, not divorce, nothing that mentions a signature. One narrow petition. Appoint a guardian ad litem for the minor and compel an accounting of the blocked account. 4 pages. It's boring. It's so boring the man on the other end will assume it's a formality. She paused. And Meredith, the court sets the service date, but I can ask for a window. I got the kitchen calendar. The pencil bracket that said Lake sat over the first 12 days of August, but there was a second weekend already circled in July because he took the boat up whenever the weather held. Ask for the 10th, I said. Delia came to my house on the last Sunday in June with a bottle of wine and her hair down. I let her in. I want you to understand that I let her in on purpose and that I had thought about it for 2 days and that the reason was not what a good person's reason would be. She sat at my kitchen island the way she had sat at it 1,000 times, with one bare foot hooked on the rung, and she said she couldn't stand it anymore, and then she cried for about 90 seconds in a way I recognized, because I have watched her do it since we were 18. Something happened, she said, with Grant. I got down 2 glasses. I did not pour anything into them. Setting them out was enough to keep my hands away from my face. Okay. It's not mere. It was never planned. She turned her rings. You have no idea what these years have been like for me. Owen and I haven't been anything for 3 years, and you were always at that clinic, every Friday, every conversation. She looked up. Do you know you talked about that place for 6 years? 6 years, Mare. The chair, the stickers, the exercises, the little pool thing you saw online. I would look at my phone on a Friday morning and I could not breathe. There it was. I had spent 3 weeks trying to construct a reason for a woman to snap at her best friend about a phone call, and I had gotten nowhere because I had been looking for cruelty, and the answer was smaller and worse. She had not been bored by my Fridays. She had been unable to sit inside them. Every week I called that woman and gave her a warm, detailed, grateful report on therapy she was invoicing a court for. 11 times across 2 years, she stamped my name on a page swearing I had asked for it. She could not make me stop talking about it, so she made me stop calling. You should have said something, I said. I'm saying it now. I mean about the Fridays. She wiped under her eye with a knuckle and laughed, wetly, relieved, because she thought we had arrived at the part where I forgive her for the smaller crime. She reached across the counter and put her hand flat on the laminated grid that was sitting there, 6 years of gold stars, and she patted it twice the way you pat a dog. God, she said, look at all these. I looked at her hand on it. 214, I said. She said she'd call me, and I said okay, and I walked her to the door and stood on the step until her tail lights turned at the corner. Then I came back in and picked up the chart and wiped the front of it with my sleeve, twice, hard, and put it up on top of the refrigerator where nobody's hands could reach it. The wine was still on the counter. I never opened it. It went to the church rummage in October with a bow on it. The 30 days ran out on the 5th of July. On the 6th, I filed a complaint with the Office for Civil Rights at Health and Human Services. The records came on the 8th in 2 bankers' boxes on a hand truck with a cover letter from Corinne Ashby regretting the delay. I took the afternoon off and laid it out on the dining room table in the order they'd sent it, and by 4 o'clock I understood that Cascade Pediatric Therapy had been keeping 2 sets of books on my daughter. The first was hers, account type, self-pay, 218 appointments scheduled since 2020, 214 attended, $95 per visit, method, cash, at the front desk, from a woman whose name is typed at the top of every line. Bethany's clinical notes ran alongside it in ordinary human sentences. Right shoulder external rotation improving. Mom reports home program compliance good. Family is self-pay at reduced rate. Intensive programming not available at this fee tier, discussed with Mom. The second account had my daughter's name on it too. Account type: Guardian Funds, court ordered. It opened in February of 2022, and it billed like a hospital. Constraint-induced intensive, 40 sessions, block 1. Aquatic protocol, 12 weeks. Home program supervision, quarterly, with clinician travel. With every block, a one-page progress summary, signed Corinne Ashby, OTRHL. And at the top of that ledger, in the field a woman named Renata had not been able to read to me over the phone in June, was the billing contact for my daughter's account. Dr. Prewitt, my best friend's name on my daughter's chart for 4 years. I read all 11 summaries. Then I read them again, side by side, and I found the thing that stopped my hands. They were the same 3 sentences. Every one. Patient is tolerating the intensive protocol well. Goals for this block have been met. Recommend continuation at current intensity. Somebody had changed the dates and printed it 11 times over 26 months. There was no pool at Cascade Pediatric Therapy. There has never been a pool at Cascade Pediatric Therapy. It is a converted insurance office on Meridian with a mat room, a ceiling fan that clicks, and a chair my daughter calls the good chair. $318,400. I stacked the boxes in the crawl space behind the Christmas bins, and I put dinner on, and when Grant came in, he said the table looked nice. He'd been served on the 10th at the lake, at 4 in the afternoon, by a process server who had to walk down to the dock. He came home Sunday night talking about harassment. By Wednesday, he had Roland Tice on the phone, and on the 24th of July, Harriet and I sat in a conference room on the 3rd floor of a building with a billboard on the roof. Tice and Bearden. We fight for injured kids. And Grant slid a stapled agreement across the table with the air of a man doing me an enormous kindness. "I'm giving you the house," he said. "$64,000 in equity, free and clear. You keep Nell. I'll do every other weekend. I'm not going to fight you. I just want this clean." Tice took us through it. Paragraph 9. I waived any claim to business and investment assets, including but not limited to Cavalier Ridge, LLC. Paragraph 11 ran 4 lines, and Tice read it in the voice menus for boilerplate. The parties acknowledge and agree that management of the minor child's court-supervised funds has at all times been, and shall remain, solely with the father. Grant was watching me while it was read, not anxiously. The way you watch a horse take a jump you already paid for. I want to explain what happened in me at that table, because it was not triumph. It was more like a door closing somewhere far off in a big house. I have been told my whole marriage that I don't understand money. I understand the arithmetic of a dental office. I understand that a parent cannot give away a child's property, because the property is not the parent's to give. A thing Harriet had said to me twice on the phone in the flat voice she uses for facts. If Cavalier Ridge had been bought with my daughter's money, then paragraph 9 was a man handing me the deed to a house he did not own, and it would be worth exactly what such things are worth. Tice's paralegal notarized both signatures at the end of the table and stamped the page and dated it. And paragraph 11 was my husband, in writing, in front of witnesses, under seal, signing his name to the sentence sole control. The man who had stood in a lobby in June and said, in front of 6 people, "Ask your mother holds the money." I picked up the pen. "My client signs paragraph 11 as written," Harriet said to the room, to the record. Grant put out his hand and I shook it, and he held on a second too long and said, "See, this is what happens when you're reasonable." And I said, "Thank you, Roland," to the lawyer instead. And I went down in the elevator and sat in my car in the shade of that billboard. I thought he'd bought silence. He'd signed a receipt. The party at the lake was the first Saturday in August. He wanted people to see the place. 40 of them came, subcontractors, the supply house crew, 2 guys from the licensing board he golfed with, Delia in white linen, carrying a tray like a hostess. There were paper lanterns strung over a long table, the same ones from the chamber mixer, rented from the same place in Big Fork. I recognized them from a photograph. He put his arm around my shoulders in front of the supply house crew and said, "This is Meredith. She schedules teeth." They laughed the way men laugh when the laugh is a favor. I carried the tray when he handed it to me. I refilled the ice. Around 9, with the deck full and the lake going pewter, he spread a document on the kitchen counter, uncapped a pen, and signed an amendment adding Delia R. Prewitt as a 20% member of Cavalier Ridge LLC, and had 2 of his subs sign under witness because he liked the formality of it, and told the room it was about time somebody around here got credit for doing the books. Delia laughed and said she'd have notarized it herself, but you can't notarize your own name. Nobody in that kitchen knew what any of it meant. 2 of them would be interviewed about it before Halloween. I stood at the sink with a dish towel over my shoulder, and I looked at his key ring on the counter, at the square black boat fob, and the cabin key I had been told for 2 years belonged to a job site, and I did not say one word. He caught me looking. "What?" "Nothing," I said. "You should get a copy of that for your file." He said that was the accountant voice again, and kissed my temple and went back out to the deck. On Monday, Judge Lindahl appointed a guardian ad litem for Nell, a woman named Adele Kirchner, 22 years on the juvenile side, the kind of person whose emails have no adjectives in them. On Wednesday, Flathead Valley Bank froze every disbursement out of the blocked account pending the accounting. On Thursday, my husband came home and told me there was some kind of computer problem at the bank. The letter was in the second box, filed under correspondence, on paper so thin I nearly turned 2 pages at once. May of 2024, Pediatric Orthopedic Program, Spokane, 4 paragraphs. Based on the submitted progress summaries indicating completion of an intensive protocol with goals met, and the reported functional threshold, we are deferring tendon transfer evaluation for this patient at this time. Please re-refer if function declines. I had never seen it. Nobody had ever said the word evaluation to me. In the spring of 2024, I had asked Bethany whether Nell would ever be a candidate for surgery, and she had said those decisions get made upstream, and I had nodded, because that is what you do when a professional says upstream. I called the program on Monday morning from the dental office parking lot and gave my daughter's date of birth and my relationship to the patient and my request in writing to follow. The coordinator was kind and thorough, and it took her 9 minutes to walk it back. The referral had gone in. The file had been reviewed, and the file by then contained 4 quarterly summaries on cascade letterhead saying a child had completed an intensive constraint-induced protocol and met her goals. So the program did what programs do with a child who is reportedly thriving. It moved her behind the children who were not. And if she wasn't thriving, I said, if none of that happened, what does 2 years cost? The coordinator got very careful. 2 years in a shoulder like Nell's is not 2 years of waiting. The arm rotates inward because the muscles that turn it out are weak, and if nothing turns it out, the ball of the joint begins to reshape the socket to match. That is not a thing you undo with a rubber duck. What would have been a transfer becomes a transfer plus a joint reduction, longer under, 6 weeks in a spica brace instead of 3. She asked if I wanted to schedule a reevaluation. I said yes, and I gave her my cell, and I said please don't call the house. I sat there with the AC blowing on my face until the windshield stopped shaking, and then I went inside and confirmed a 4:30 Crown prep and a cleaning, and at 5 I drove to the Flathead County Attorney's office and asked the woman at the window who handles economic crimes. His name was Neil Ostrander, and he had a corner desk and a jar of pens with other agencies' logos on them, and he did not look thrilled to see a walk-in at 10 to 6. I put 3 things on his desk: certified copies of 11 petitions from cause number DV200938, each with a notarized consent bearing my name and a middle initial I have never used. Certified copies of 11 notary journal entries furnished under seal by the notary herself, and the clinic's own certified billing ledger showing that on the same dates, the same child, at the same clinic, had been a cash self-pay patient at $95 a week. Ostrander read for a long time. He pulled the March 10th page out and laid it beside the ledger and put his finger on the line. "Personally known to notary," he said. "I was in the waiting room," I said. 40 feet away. She brought me a coffee. He picked up his phone and told somebody he was going to be late. There was one more page in the boxes that I had walked past 4 times. It was a system printout, the kind that comes out of a billing program when somebody hits the wrong button. Landscape, tiny font, a report header that said, batch summary, billing class, guardian funds, court ordered, and under it 9 rows, account numbers, last name initials, date opened, lifetime billed. Row 6 was my daughter. Row 1 had been opened in the fall of 2021. Before my daughter's account existed, before her father ever filed a thing, that billing class already had a customer. Grant found out what the computer problem was on Friday. He came in through the garage still holding his phone, and he did not put down his keys for 40 minutes. The bank had told him the account was locked, pending a court-ordered accounting. Tice's office had told him the same thing in different words, and then stopped taking his calls before noon. He stood in my kitchen and told me I had destroyed this family. He told me a lot of things in the next hour, that he had carried us, that I had gone behind his back like a coward, that Nell would grow up knowing her mother put her father in a courtroom over paperwork. He picked up the fruit bowl and set it down hard enough to crack it, and then apologized for the bowl. I stayed at the counter with my hands in the sink water. "You signed paragraph 11, I said. "What?" "Sole control. You had Roland read it out loud." He looked at me the way you look at a dog that has spoken. Then he went out to the truck and sat in it in the driveway for an hour with the dome light on, and at some point he called Delia because at 9:40 my phone lit up and kept lighting up. 26 messages between 9:40 and midnight. They started at we need to talk and ended just after midnight at you have no idea what you're doing to my son. I didn't answer any of them. I want to say that was strategy. Some of it was. Harriet took the batch summary apart over 2 days on her own, off the public docket, because minors' compromise orders are public and account numbers are not, but dates and dollar amounts are, and there are only so many blocked accounts in one county. Row 1 was a boy named Isaiah Duhamel, 9 years old, net into his account, $412,000. Withdrawn across 8 petitions filed by Tice and Bearden, supported by invoices from Cascade Pediatric Therapy for intensive protocols, notarized by Delia R. Prewitt, $196,000. His mother's name was Tricia. She worked nights at the hospital laundry. She had, as far as anyone could tell, never been told a single thing. Harriet called me on a Sunday, and it was not the money she called about. On that same public docket, filed in July by Tice and Bearden, was a petition for final distribution and closure of the blocked account of Isaiah Duhamel, set for hearing on the 28th of August. The boy's own claim, Harriet said, is told. He has years. He's 9. His account does not. Unopposed petitions get granted. If nobody stood up in that courtroom on the 28th and objected, the rest of that boy's money went out the door and the file closed. 19 days. I looked at the kitchen calendar, at the pencil bracket that said Lake over the first 12 days of the month, and I thought about a man on a dock with a boat fob and a woman in white linen, and I counted forward on my fingers like a child. He had booked 12 days at the lake. He'd come home on the 5th, the day the account locked, and he had not gone back once. So I stopped counting his days and started counting mine. From that Sunday, I needed 9. On Tuesday, the 11th of August, I took a personal day and put on the navy dress I wear to funerals. Harriet had drafted the affidavit, and I had read it 9 times. It ran to 2 pages, and it said almost nothing. I am the mother of the minor child. I did not appear before a notary public on the following dates. I did not sign the attached consents. My legal signature is attached as Exhibit A. I have never used my middle initial. I signed it in her office with the pen I took from the clinic in June, the one with the sticky clicker. She looked at the pen and didn't ask. At 8:05, I was at the counter of the post office on 1st Avenue East, overnight, signature required, addressed to the Notary Division in Helena, the affidavit, the certified journal entries, the certified petitions. At 9:20, I hand-delivered a copy to the clerk of Judge Lindahl's court, attached to Adele Kirchner's motion for a full accounting. At 10, I sat down across from Neil Ostrander and gave him the original. He read the last line, put it in a folder, wrote a case number on the tab, and said, This becomes a police matter today. I asked him what that meant for my daughter's money. Restitution follows conviction, he said. The trust follows the money. Different offices, same file. Then he asked me a question. Nobody had asked me since June. He asked whether I had a place to be if things got loud at home. I said I had a house with $64,000 in equity that a man had signed over to me because he thought he was being generous. There was a fourth envelope in my bag. I sat in the lot of a hospital laundry entrance at 11:15 and wrote it out longhand on a sheet of legal pad, and I put in it nothing that was not already public. A cause number from the basement of the courthouse, the date and time of a hearing on the public docket, the 28th of August at 9, one sentence about what an objection is and who is allowed to file one, Harriet Vance's office number, and at the bottom, because I could not help it, 4 words, "You are not crazy." I did not put my daughter's name in it. I did not put a single page of anyone's medical record in it. I have thought about that letter a great deal since, and I would write it the same way again. I left it with the woman at the laundry window and asked her to give it to Tricia Duhamel when she came on at 3. 17 days left. That afternoon, my husband went before the state electrical board on a customer complaint about a permit. He'd pulled 2 weeks late on a strip mall panel job, and he came home at 6 holding a takeout bag and a bottle of something with a red label, and he was luminous. "Dismissed," he said. "Letter of caution, not even in the file." He set the bag down and spread his hands. "That's it, Meredith. That's how it works when your paperwork is clean as a drawing. You want to know why I don't panic? Because I don't have anything to panic about." He put a hand on the back of my neck, friendly, heavy. "You should call Harriet and tell her to drop the accounting thing. You're paying that woman $200 an hour to embarrass me." I said I'd think about it, and I got out plates, and Nell came in and asked if we could eat outside because there was a nighthawk over the neighbor's roof. We ate outside. I was funny that night. He did the thing with his voice that makes Nell laugh so hard she gets hiccups. At one point, he reached over and tucked her hair back with 2 fingers, gently, the way he used to do in the hospital in 2019. He had 7 days. It took 33 hours. The notary division moved first, because notary divisions are small, and their entire job is signatures. On Wednesday morning, Delia's commission was suspended pending investigation, and the state sent notice to every entity that had recorded a document under her seal in the past 4 years. By Wednesday noon, Harriet had recorded a lease pendens against the property on Cavalier Ridge on Adele's amended petition to impose a constructive trust, which is what a lawyer does instead of shouting. At 4 that afternoon, Roland Tice moved to withdraw as counsel in both matters and self-reported to the Office of Disciplinary Counsel, which I am told is what a lawyer does when he has finally read his own file. And by 5, Corinne Ashby, who had signed 11 progress summaries for a child she had never once evaluated, had a state investigator in her waiting room, sitting in the good chair. On Thursday morning, an hour before the accounting hearing, Lindahl had set back in July, Cascade Pediatric Therapy was suspended from 3 payer networks pending review. He picked Nell up from summer camp on Wednesday afternoon without telling me, and took her for ice cream, and brought her back at 6 with her chin sticky and her eyes doing something I didn't like. She waited until he'd gone. Then she came and stood in the kitchen doorway with her hands behind her back the way she does when she's been given a job. "Mom," she looked at the floor, "can you tell the court people it's okay now?" I put down the colander. "Dad says the money thing was a mix-up and it's all fixed and the court people don't know that and they'll take his tools." She said it fast, in order, the way you say something you rehearsed in a truck. "He says you're the only one they'll listen to. He says if you just call the lady and say it's a mix-up, everything goes back to normal and I can go back to Fridays." The freezer hummed. Somewhere on the block a lawnmower started. I want to tell you that I sat her down and gave her a wise speech. What I actually did was crouch to her height and take both of her hands, one strong and one not, and hold them. "Did Dad tell you those words, or did you think of them?" She hesitated. That hesitation is the single worst thing that happened to me all year, worse than the courthouse basement, worse than the letter about the pool. "He said it would sound better from me," she said. I have never in my life wanted so badly to say something ugly about a person to their child. There is a sentence I could have handed her in that kitchen, and she would have carried it for 30 years. Okay, I said. Here's what's true. The money is Nell's money. It was always Nell's money. Grown-ups are figuring out where it went, and that's a grown-up job, and it isn't yours. I squeezed her hands. You are never in trouble for asking me a question. Not one you thought of, and not one somebody gave you. She nodded. She asked if she could have a popsicle even though she'd had ice cream, and I said yes, and she went out on the step. I stood at the sink for a while. Then I texted Harriet 4 words. He used her today. And Harriet texted back 1 line about supervised contact, and I said do it. Bethany called me that Wednesday night from a grocery store parking lot. I could hear the carts. I'm not supposed to be doing this, she said. There was a man at the clinic today with a state ID card, and he asked me about a pool. She had been Nell's therapist for 4 years. She is 26 years old, and she talks fast when she's frightened. In the spring of 2023, I saw a summary in the chart with Corinne's signature on it, and it said Nell had done a 40-session constraint-induced block, and A cart went past. Meredith, I ran that kid's Fridays. I know what she did and didn't do. So I went to Corinne and I said, I think there's a documentation error on the Morrow file, and she said the Guardian Funds side is administrative, it's Delia's, and I should stay in my lane and chart my sessions. And you did. I did. She was quiet a moment. I was 8 months into my first job. I stood in my hallway with my hand on the door frame. Down the hall, Nell was asleep with the light on again. Here is what I did not say to that girl, though I had a version of it ready and it was very good. She was 22 years old, and she went to her boss and used the actual Word documentation, and her boss shut her down. And she believed her boss, because that is what 22-year-olds do in the first job they've ever loved. And for 3 years after that, she showed up every Friday at 8:15 in the morning and made my daughter's shoulder work and clapped for her and let her sit in the good chair for 10 minutes past the hour when the schedule allowed it. Write down what you just told me, I said. Date it tonight. Don't send it to me. Send it to nobody. When the investigator calls you back, read it to him. Okay. Bethany, you didn't take anything. She cried a little and thanked me, and I told her to get her groceries. She testified in October at Corinne Ashby's licensing hearing. Her handwritten note is Exhibit 9. Grant had not slept since the account froze. I heard him at 2, at 3, walking the hall, opening the fridge and not taking anything out of it. That same Wednesday night he came into the kitchen and sat down across from me and did the thing I had been braced for since June. He begged. I was good at it. He said he'd made a mistake in 2021, and every year after that had been him trying to fix the first year. He said the boat was for us. He said his father had died broke in a rented room, and he had promised himself he would never be that. And did I know what it does to a man to be that? He said if I let this go through, our daughter's father becomes a felon, and one day she will be 17 and she will look it up, and I will have done that to her. His eyes were wet. I believe they were honestly wet. That is the part nobody tells you. I put my hands flat on the table. You told a court 11 times that she was in a pool, I said. She has never been in a pool. He started to answer and I stood up. The rest of it you can say to Mr. Ostrander. There is one more thing from that week, and it is the thing I am least able to explain and most sure about. On Thursday morning, before the hearing, I called Owen. They're going to serve her at work or at home, I said. I don't know which. Don't let Wyatt be in the house. I was quiet for a second. Okay. And Saturday swim. I'll still take him. Same as always, 7:40, I'll honk. Meredith. Same as always, I said, and hung up, because I did not want to hear whatever he was going to say, and I did not want to be thanked for the bare minimum a grown woman owes a 10-year-old boy. I took Wyatt to swim for 9 more Saturdays. He never asked me a single question about any of it, and I never offered, and every week he ate the same gas station cinnamon roll in my passenger seat and told me about a girl in his lane who could do the butterfly. I saw Delia once in that whole stretch, in the second-floor hallway of the courthouse, outside the wrong courtroom, in a blazer that didn't fit her anymore. She said my name. I said, "This isn't for you," and I went in. Courtroom 2 on the 13th of August held more people than a blocked account accounting is supposed to hold. Grant sat at the far table with a lawyer he'd hired the night before, a young man who kept touching his own tie. The red-spined book was already on the clerk's table in a sealed evidence bag with a number on the tag, and Delia sat in the second row with her own lawyer, looking at it. Corinne Ashby sat one row behind her with the clinic's custodian of records. Roland Tice, no longer counsel for anyone, sat by himself at the end of a bench with his hands between his knees, and I noticed that he had taken off his watch. Neil Ostrander stood at the back with his shoulder against the doorframe and did not sit down once. Adele Kirchner read the accounting into the record. She has a flat, unhurried voice, and she does not editorialize, and I have never in my life heard anything so loud. Between February of 2022 and April of 2024, she said, this court entered 11 orders releasing funds from the blocked account of the minor child. Each order was entered on a petition seeking reimbursement to the father for medical expenses he represented to this court that he had already paid. The total released was $318,400. She turned a page. The clinic identified in those invoices has produced its certified ledger. The clinic never received any portion of those funds. The clinic never billed for them. The billing class under which the invoices were generated was a paper class that never touched the clinic's deposits. Another page. During the same period, the minor child was a cash self-pay patient at that clinic. She was scheduled for 218 appointments and attended 214. Each visit was paid in cash, $95, at the front desk. The clinic's ledger identifies the payer on every line as the child's mother. The mother's employer has provided her wage records for the period, $22.40 an hour. Adele closed the folder. Your Honor, the account intended to pay for this child's care disbursed $318,400, and not $1 of it reached her care. Her care was paid for by a woman who was told there was no money. Nobody moved. The bailiff's radio said something about a parking issue on Main. Judge Lindahl took off his glasses and looked down the length of that courtroom, past the lawyers, past the paper bag with the book in it, and he looked at me. He looked at me for what was probably 4 seconds and felt like a season. Mrs. Morrow, he said, the record reflects it. I have been proposed to on a dock, and I have held my daughter 11 minutes after she was born with the whole right side of her body limp. Nothing has ever undone me like a man in a black robe saying that a record reflects it. Harriet stood and handed the clerk one more document, and the clerk handed it up. It was 4 pages. A proposed order appointing a corporate trustee over every recovered dollar, and a permanent injunction barring my husband from any contact with my daughter's funds or her providers until she reaches majority. Filed the same morning, 3 floors down in the dissolution, was an amended parenting plan with the word supervised on every line. I put my copy on the table in front of me, squared to the edge, and left it there. On Saturday morning, Nell came into the kitchen carrying her jar. It is a pickle jar with a slot cut in the lid and Bike written on masking tape, and it had been on her dresser since her 6th birthday. And it had $61.50 in it. The Bike cost $2,380. It has 1 brake lever on the left and a grip on the right side her hand can rest in. And she found it on a website in a waiting room and asked me to save the picture. She also had a piece of paper, folded twice, written in pencil, in the enormous, careful letters of a kid who is proud of her handwriting. Can you send this to Miss Adele? She said. It's for the judge lady's boss. I had told her some of it by then, not all of it. I had told her that the money for her Fridays had been taken and that a court was going to get it back, because she is 7, and she had already worked out that adults were in her business, and lying to a child about that is how you teach her not to trust her own eyes. And on Thursday night she had heard me on the phone with Harriet saying she has until the 28th, and she had appeared in the doorway in her nightgown and asked who does. So I told her about a boy, 9, a different clinic file, a mother who worked nights. Her letter said this. I am copying it exactly. Dear Miss Adele, I want to give my dad's part. There is $61.50. It is not enough, but you can have it all. Also, can my part go to the boy first because he ran out of time before me? I can wait. I am good at Fridays. From Nell Morrow, age 7. I sat down on the kitchen floor with my back against the dishwasher. She patted my head with her left hand, which is what she does, and told me it was okay, and asked whether we could still get the bike later, maybe in the spring. He surrendered on Tuesday the 18th. His lawyer had arranged it, the way lawyers do. A phone call, a time, a side entrance, no cameras. 11 counts of forgery. Theft by common scheme. Tampering with public records. The warrant had been signed on Monday afternoon, and Ostrander had called me himself so that I would hear it from a person and not from a neighbor. Grant came by the house at 9 to get a duffel bag out of the garage. That was the arrangement. He was clean-shaven, and he had a haircut, which I understood. Nell was on the porch steps in her pajamas. She had the sticker chart on her knees. She'd gotten it down off the top of the refrigerator herself, sometime that week. I still don't know what she stood on, and put it under her bed, and I hadn't known. "Hi, Bug," he said. She turned it around so he could see it. 6 years of Fridays, 214 gold stars, and 4 blank squares. And the narrow column down the right-hand side with the marker heading a volunteer had printed in 2020. "Grown up who came." She pointed at it with her left hand, all the way down, top to bottom. "Mom paid for all of these," Nell said. "Every single Friday I asked her if you were coming. She always said you were working." She held the chart out to him. "I saved you a space every week. You can keep it now." Then she went inside and let the screen door bang, because she is 7 and she has never once closed a door quietly in her life. He stood in my driveway, holding a laminated grid of his daughter's childhood, and he did not say anything, and there was nothing in his face at all. Whatever that was, it was not the same man who had been in my kitchen a week before with wet eyes in his father's rented room. A silver sedan came around the corner at 9:20 and stopped at the curb, and his lawyer got out and stood by the passenger door with his hands folded, patient, the way you stand at a funeral. The mail came at 2:40. Among the circulars there was a windowed envelope from the Department of Labor and Industry, addressed to Grant Morrow, summarily suspending his license to work as an electrician in the state of Montana, pending the outcome of the criminal case, and I set it on the hall table where the keys used to go. 5 months later, the lake froze and started to break up again, which it does in January when the wind comes down off the Swan and works the ice like a seam. Grant pleaded guilty in November to 11 counts of forgery and 1 count of theft by common scheme. The exploitation count was dismissed as part of the plea. Sentencing is in March. The house on Cavalier Ridge and the boat were traced, dollar for dollar, into a court-supervised trust for my daughter with a corporate trustee, because a thing bought with a child's money belongs to the child, and it took a judge 4 minutes to say so. His license is gone for good. He lives above a bar in Columbia Falls now, in a rented room, which is the exact phrase he used about his father in my kitchen in August, and I do not think he has noticed yet. He came into Ridgeline Family Dental in December with a cracked molar and no insurance. I gave him a clipboard, and the form on it was the financial hardship application, and I told him that someone would call him about the sliding scale within 2 business days. He filled it out at the counter with his coat still on. He was there 12 minutes. He said thank you when he left, and I said you're welcome, and Bree looked at me afterward and asked if I was all right, and I said the front desk isn't the place for that, and we did a 4:00 crown. Delia's commission was revoked, and her name was struck from the state registry, which means that for the rest of her life, in the one column she was ever proud of, there is a line through it. She pled in December. The red-spined book she kept so carefully. The book that was supposed to prove she was the reliable one, the professional one, the one who stamped things for a living, is Exhibit 4, and every line she ever wrote in it was read out loud in a room with a stenographer. The divorce went through. Owen has Wyatt during the school year. Roland Tice was suspended from the practice of law in a written opinion that is published and searchable, and carries the firm name from the billboard on the roof, the one about fighting for injured kids. He disgorged $16,500 into my daughter's trust, which was his fee for filing 11 petitions, and 8 other files at that firm have been reopened. Corinne Ashby's clinic lost its provider status for 6 months. Part of the consent agreement was that she personally notify every family whose child summary she had signed without evaluating the child. There were 9 calls to make. I know what my call sounded like. I have wondered about the other 8. Tricia Duhamel walked into Harriet Vance's office on the 24th of August, 4 days before that hearing, with my letter in her purse. She stood up in courtroom 1 on the 28th and objected, and the petition died on the spot. Isaiah's account has been restored, and there is a civil action pending against the firm. She sent me a card at Christmas with a photograph of a boy on a swing set. She spelled my name wrong, and I have it on the fridge. Adele Kirchner wrote back to Nell on court letterhead. She explained that the court was not able to accept her $61.50, but that her offer had been placed in the permanent file of the case and that the judge had read it. That letter is taped above my daughter's bed, next to a picture of a nighthawk. Nell had her surgery the 2nd week of November. Joint reduction and a tendon transfer, 6 hours and 6 weeks, in a brace that goes from her chin to her waist and makes her walk like a small offended robot. She is out of it now, and 3 weeks into the new therapy, she reached up with her right hand and turned off her own bedroom light, and then she made me come and watch her do it 3 times. The trustee's first authorized expenditure, approved by the court in December, was $2,380 for an adaptive bicycle with 1 brake lever on the left. It's in the garage under a sheet. There's still snow on the road, and the therapist says, "March at the earliest for a bike," and every day after school, Nell goes out and takes the sheet off and puts it back on. She has already decided about spring. She's told me the route. Down 6th, left at the church, along the fence by the ball fields where I once put my head on a steering wheel for the length of one song, and into the bike rack at the north doors with everybody else. I still work at the dental office. I still have Fridays, and Fridays are still hers, and last week we spent one at the library, and one of the volunteers asked whether she wanted a sticker chart for her reading minutes, and Nell said, "No thank you, she was retired from those." Out on Flathead, the ice is going gray and loud. It cracks all night this time of year. You can hear it from the highway, a long way off, like something very large deciding to move. I want to say one more thing to you before I go, and it isn't about him. For 6 years, I was the person in my house who said no. No to the specialist, no to the summer program, no to the bike. I said it kindly, and I said it every time, and I believed I was being the adult about money, and my daughter learned my face as the face that no comes from. That is the part that took the longest to put down, not the betrayal, the bookkeeping I did on myself. So here's what I'd ask you, and I'd genuinely like to know. Is there something in your life you've been carrying as your own failure? A no you keep saying, a number you keep apologizing for, that somebody else actually handed you? Tell me in the comments. I read them. I read every single one, and some of them I read twice. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end of this one. Take care of yourself this week, and I'll see you in the next story.